How's it going, everybody? This is my little spiel on a definition of spiritual formation. So simply put, spiritual formation is the process of consumed believers being made more like Jesus through the Holy Spirit's power activating believers' spiritual disciplines. I want to take some time to kind of break down what I mean by that. First of all, spiritual formation is for consumed believers. Steve Deneff in his book, More Than Forgiveness, talks about how discipleship, or being made more like Christ, is more about direction than proximity, the direction of believers' hearts. So in the times of Jesus in the New Testament, there's a lot of people who were kind of checking out, what's this Jesus guy all about? And they were close to him, they walked around him, they listened to him, but it was just a proximity thing. It wasn't a heart thing. They weren't really consumed and directed towards him. And it's those who were consumed by him are the ones that were formed. And so we see this in John 5 with the story of the invalid who had been paralyzed for 38 years, right? He'd been far from God for 38 years. He's paralyzed, he's broken, he's hurting. He's tried everything to get better, nothing has worked, and he has this encounter with Jesus, and Jesus says to him, hey, do you want to get well? He asks them this question, do you desire to get well? And he's like, yeah. And having tried everything, he submitted himself before Jesus. He's like, yeah, I want to get better. What do I do? And he just gave him some instructions, and sure enough, he was transformed. And so we see it's not just the outward behaviors that God is interested with. It's not just outward behaviors that leads to transformation, but it's about the desire. Do you really want to get well? And those are the believers that are formed. So what are we formed into? We're formed into the likeness of Christ, the image of Christ. It says in Genesis 1 that we're made in the image of God. The fall kind of ruined that and messed that up. God comes down, becomes us, shows us what that's supposed to look like. So Christ is the model of who we're trying to identify with and look like and live like. Steve Deneff and David Drury in their book Soul Shift talk about how do we measure transformed life, and one of the big shifts that they talk about is a shift from me to you. So we're talking about what it means really to be formed into the image of Christ. We're talking about this significant, authentic, radical change in our hearts from being consumed about ourselves and our own needs to being consumed of the needs of others. And so this formation, it takes place by the Holy Spirit, His power in our life that is combined and activated by our spiritual disciplines. And so Richard Foster in his book Celebration and Discipline kind of defines spiritual disciplines as being the places where we put ourselves before God so that He can change us. And to kind of unpack this using a sports analogy, I'll share a quick story. When I was in college, my sophomore and junior year, I was very disappointed with my cross-country and track seasons. I had not been performing like I wanted to, and I tried everything I knew how to do. I worked hard, I gave everything I had, but I could not get past this threshold. We got a new coach my senior year. His name was Gary Smith. Maybe you'll see this. Shout out to you, Gary Smith. And I remember just telling him, I was frustrated. 2 years, I haven't gotten better. And he says, you just show up to practice, do what I tell you. I got some tricky things up my sleeve. He was Jamaican. That's my best take out of Jamaican accent. I know I butchered it. But the point there being, I just showed up, right? I was desperate. I want to get better. I'm done of this old, David who can't, run as fast as he wants to. I want something better. And so I showed up, submitted to what he told me to do, I was obedient. And boy, that whipped my butt a lot. Coach, why are we doing 2400s, man? But I did it, right? I was desperate. I want to get better. Do you want to get better? Do you want to get well? Yes. Though I didn't understand, this process that would get me there, I submitted to it. I did it. And sure enough, by the end of the season, had an incredible success and improved considerably. And so the point in sharing that story is that there's this thing that happens where we submit ourselves before God through spiritual disciplines, whether it's prayer, meditation, whatever, and He uses us in that place of surrender, submission, and trust and obedience to then form us. He can't form us if we don't put ourselves in a position to be formed, and if all we're doing is trying to be formed without allowing Him to direct, then we're not going to be formed either. Those are two extremes. But as we submit ourselves before God, and He uses our disciplines to change us. So that's what I got for you. Spiritual formation, the process of consumed believers being made into the image of Christ by the Holy Spirit's power, activating the believer's spiritual disciplines.